computer. Perfect. Well, Evans, if you allow me, I'm going to share my screen in order to show the presentation of Codex Publishing.
Okay.
Here we are. All right. So I have consulted some of the resources from SCORE, and SCORE gives you an excellent summary about the pitch deck for entrepreneurs and companies looking for capital. They explain the different stages of a business, and for me, it's really easy to understand the pre-seed time, the angel investors, and all the rounds that you can ask for your business. I'm only focusing on the first one from the point of view of LLC based on Boulder, Colorado, that started operations on October, and until June, it has a logical strategy for raising a pitch deck for pre-seed capital. Small Business Administration puts some range about the amounts. So I'm using the amount of from 0 to 75K in this presentation. So the structure of this presentation is five main areas: the business case, the solution that I'm proposing, the industry, and the business model of the publishing industry, and the conclusion that I want to raise. Putting this presentation trying to be at 10 minutes at the most, just to be executive, and let me start. So the business case, I'm only, please wear the lenses of selling stuff on Amazon. I want to portray that Amazon's global sales is more than 468 billion USD last year. From those amounts, 5 billion USD comes from book sales, which is a big market to think about. On that category of book sales, you can choose any selection. The user can select of books of a reading of a lifetime. And one of the most popular categories is children's books, which is exploding basically. It's important to mention that in English-speaking world, it has Amazon Books has more than 15,000 book categories, to niches, and genres to choose from. So just to put it as an example, this is the books of a lifetime that everyone should read according to Amazon. Probably you have found this literature that is classic or that you have read across your life. And let me point out the children's niche, the children's book, which is an interesting thing to see. So Amazon Books, I use the rankings of the top sellers, and here I'm analyzing 5 types of books. You can see there's stories with important characters, animals, and books for learning for different ages. Children's books has different categories, and these are the ones that sells the most. The ranges comes from less than $10 and $4 probably, all of them. And I want to show the comparison since my nationality as well. Well, these are the same picture, but from Amazon Mexico. The books that I'm portraying, it's similar. The prices are as well competitive, and I want to put your attention on the ratings. Ratings on the US market are higher, 37,000K for the first book. For the third book, 50,000K ratings and 72,000K ratings for the fourth book, in comparison to the Mexican market. What does that mean? That means that US market is probably 300 times higher than the Mexican market. Having said that, I want to portray the opportunity that I'm seeing. And I just start with a question: who buys children's books? The answer is parents. And according to many publishers and about the industry, just to say what is everyone knows. 35% of parents buy the books that are recommended to them by a family member. 61% of children's books are bought by adults around the ages of 18, 44 years old. And 70% of those purchases are made by women. So what does that mean? That moms and teachers have the most influence on the reading material for their books. Most of the demographics is middle class and have some college education. The opportunity that I'm seeing is that Amazon gives you books for every stage, from baby to 2, from 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and ages from 9 to 12. And the opportunity is that on the top 5 or the top 10 or the top 100 children's books, there are basically no bilingual children books in the top charts across Amazon Marketplace for both marketplaces, Amazon US and Amazon Mexico. So I see a room to produce and promote original stories that are significant to children. Let's compare apples to apples. This is an interesting book that it's called Dragon Loves Tacos. And the story of this book, in economical terms, is the price. If you see in Amazon, it costs almost $9, and it's produced by Adam Rubin, and it's illustrated by Daniel Steinman. I bring their attention to this because the word tacos implies a cultural connotation that for me it's important to mention. It's a funny book. It's a book that portrays the culture and the character exploring the situation. But what I want to bring attention is how much they are selling. This book, there are tools to analyze how many books has on sales, and on the US market, it has more than 5,000 copies. What does that mean? That this book sells 300 copies per day. That's an enormous performance of this book. And in comparison to Mexico, well, this book sells almost 400 units per month and 20 units per day. So that gives you the range of the amount of success that any book can have. The solution that I see on this, okay, so I'm a publishing company, and the mission of my company is to create, to produce, and to sell bilingual books for children. And the purpose is to pass from generation to generation endearing stories from the Hispanic and Latinx communities living in the US. My vision here is to strive to attract the gifted talent, artists that I see, editors, writers, illustrators from the US and Mexico, in order to share collective imaginations through selling through. The origin of the philosophy of the publishing company is that if you go to Google right now and look for Codex Mendoza, you will find that it was one of the first books that were created in the continent of America around 1542. It was a book that was commissioned to portray the living life of the Spaniard and the indigenous people at that time. Right now, that book, the original book, it's currently based on the collection of Oxford Library at Oxford. And here on the side, well, you can see one of the most emblematic illustration of that book, where narrated the origin of the Mexican culture. So on that solution, on that embody of philosophy of the publishing company, I have to analyze who are the rivalry and the big houses of publishing companies. And let's start explaining what's happening. and there's a transition of selling books online. Actually, 55% of all books are selling from in the US are selling now in Amazon. Last year, a global book publishing industry portrayed a revenue of 143 billion USD. That implies 26 USD billion in the US and only almost 400 million in Mexico. The top 5 book publishers, I'm not competing against them, but it's important to have them. It's Pearson's, which is educational, Relks, which is a conglomerate of many publishers, Thomson Reuters, Versland, and Penguin Random House. Those top 5 have a revenue of 25 billion USD. And independent publishing companies like myself, they're starting to have little participation, but they are growing. Having said that about the publishing company, let's go to the demographics. Who is buying what? And I bring the attention really short that Hispanic and Latinx heritage is growing in the US. The connotation of the X on Latino or Latina, it's just meant to disrupt the Spanish and English language, just to put a promote on that part. This heritage is important for me to mention because it has 2 major origins. The word Hispaniola comes from the Latin word of España or Española. And another origin, it comes back from the 60s, basically from the literary point of view, the Latin America boom, where there are multiple authors that they were promoted there. Let's go to numbers. On numbers right now in the US, 2021, there's around more than 330 million people living in the US, and it's projected that 400 million will be living in the US by the year of 2050. What does that mean to the Hispanic Latino population? Well, right now, living in the US, it's almost 62 million people living there. And there was an important increase over the last decade. On that market, 62 million, well, let's see where they live. And the Hispanic population, well, ranges from state to state. Just to mention, California has more than 50 million. And there are top 5 highest states that are living, and they account for more from the 62 million, they account for 44 million people living. Those states, everyone knows them: California, Texas, Florida, New York, Arizona, Illinois, New Jersey, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada. But that size. Let's go to counties. Counties, the top 5 counties account for 11 million of those population. And those counties are in Los Angeles, in California, are Harris in Texas, is Miami in Florida, it's Cook County in Illinois, and is Maricopa in Arizona. So that puts a portrait of where our target market, how many they are, and where they are living in the US. And let's talk about right now to the business model. Codex Publishing uses the business model of Kindle Direct Publishing. That's a business model of Amazon. It's just like selling physical products by the business model called Fulfillment by Amazon, but for books on demand. And it has a potential, this model has a potential to sell physical, digital, or audiobooks across 13 marketplaces. To contrast both models, I want to draw your attention on the inventories point of view. By selling products on Amazon, you need a lot of inventory to send to a fulfillment center. In KDP, well, your inventory is your digital file, and then Amazon produces by demand. And both of those systems, they pick and pack and ship your products. They manage the returns, the customer service. You can sell in multi-channel fulfillments. And also from the inventory point of view, with Kindle Direct Publishing, since you don't have inventory, you don't pay storage fees, which are an important cost to consider. And one important point of view about revenue is that in fulfillment by Amazon, well, you get paid every 2 weeks by Amazon. Here with Kindle Direct Publishing, you get paid every month. So that will be important factor to consider from the cash revenue point of view. Having said that, well, let me explain you very basically what is the business model of Kindle Direct Publishing. And it's basically think about these 4 stages as your production, which is basically as an author or as a publishing company, you need to prepare your legal information, your tax information. Here, Amazon tracks you that you are an established business, that you have complied with all the IRS requirements in order to sell, because you're paying your taxes every year. This is an important point to have, because not everyone can sell books on Amazon. What does that mean? That if you sell products, you can be a Mexican, and a Spaniard, or a Japanese selling products to Amazon, but you cannot sell books unless you have a company based on the US. If you go to the second step, well, you as a book author, you decide what type of book are you going to produce. That will help readers to be attracted to get your book seen. And the following step is the production, about your manuscript, your design cover, to grab readers' attention. And then you have to understand what does that mean, or everything about copyrights, everything about pricing correctly, and so on. So that's kind of four major areas of understanding of the business model. Let me go to the numbers now. Let me, if this makes sense or not. And the numbers, well, one of the major advantages is that first, from the production point of view, you produce one book and then you continue to the other one. And that makes you a potentially constant passive income per month. That's the beauty about it. Let's explain the royalties. And in short, if you sell a book that sells $5, you will get revenue free about all the cost, about 10% of that book. What does that mean? From $5 that you sell, you will get 50 cents per book. And take into consideration all the concept of cost production, formatting, printing, distribution, marketing, and so on. And if you have multiple books selling at the same time, well, Amazon algorithm will promote you organic and rank you on the top sellers. That's my goal. That's why the first 50 units are crucial to start selling the moment that you publish a book. And I put in 3 types of books, which represent different sale prices: $5, $10, and $15. My main goal on this business is to produce 100 book titles, low content or high content, for the next 18 months, and to start selling in the 13 marketplaces, but primarily focusing on the US and Mexico market. And what does that mean? That 100 books, I know that of those 100 books, not all of the books will sell the same. 20 of them will draw the most revenue from this. But in the second table, I want to portray that if I only focus by unit sales, I am anticipating or making the case that if I sell one book, a total sale will be $5 and a total royalty will be 50 cents. But if you go through the numbers, you will find that the royalty start making more sense if after you have reached a total volumes of 10,000, 50,000, and my threshold will be 150K unit sales, and that will comply with the total royalty of 75K USD. And finally, well, this is my business, modest numbers right now. For personal reasons, I have only sell 3 units organic, 2 in the UK and 1 in the US, with only 1 book, which is a journal that is on the platform. Right now, I'm finishing this June with 3 more books that will come, 1 for Father's Day and 2 for children's book for education purposes. It's important to understand what makes the differentiation of business operations. And here is, we are based on all the software tools that are proven to work. And just to give you some specific licenses, well, here there are some that allow you to understand what is selling, what is working, the niches, the software material for the content inside, and the search numbers, and so on, so on. This is the technical part where I know how to operate these software tools, and that allows me to implement to my team. Basically, on the book production, I see 3 teams. From the point of view of art design and writing, there will be a specific team. The editors and the copyright will be the ones who bulletproof everything, and the marketing and looking for partnerships, they will be the ones who will promote every book that I will be selling. What type of books? Well, I will start with low content, which is journals, planners, writing prompts, etc., which is easy to produce and easy to understand the game. And then I come from high content books, which is commissions and produce characters that are compelling with the cultural narrative that I'm portraying earlier. And then original stories that it will be based on commissions that might be important to produce original content. An important caveat to mention, well, there are 3 types of content on the books. The evergreens, which is holidays, we're seasons, every Mother's Day, every Father's Day that is coming up, and so on. Specific interests and hobbies that are important to look. Me talking about the first book that I did, a journal for roller skating. And then the new trends that they will come with a specific world events or book fairs. And just to summarize this business model, well, let me just recap what I just probably portrayed, which is I see an opportunity of selling books through Amazon for children in the US and Mexico. It's a portable market. It's a profitable market. Mothers and teachers represent the 70% of buyers on these books, and there's a room to produce bilingual books. As well, talking about the industry, publishing companies are transitioning to sell on Amazon. Independent publishing companies like ourselves, it's growing. And there's an important market population to explore, which is around 60 million right now, and expanding. So the goal for the next 18 months is to produce 100 books. The pre-seed capital that I'm anticipating to cover is around 75K, and that will allow to sustain the business operation, which is working capital, a team of illustrators, writers, and editors, a small one, and a small team of copyright, which is in charge of all the ISBN numbers, which is the number that makes legal registration of your book. And the marketing side, well, pay-per-click with campaigns, which is like the secret sauce of that's on Amazon. Apart from that, well, thank you for your attention, Evan.
Sure. I had a question. I didn't want to interrupt your flow.
Thank you, man.
But when you were going through the sales and you were showing commissions and commission revenue, the example on that page appeared that you were only looking at the 10% margin books. You
Yeah.
weren't assuming any sales of any of the other kinds of books. Is that because your focus for the first 5 or 6 quarters of operation is just to do the lowest margin books, or might you have some higher margin books in that? It just seemed a little too simple,
Yeah.
in my mind. But if your project, if you're projecting that for the first several quarters, you're only going to be focusing on type 1 kind of books, you should say that. Otherwise, you raise the question.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a banker's comment here.
Please go hard, man.
75K, not a lot of money. If you're going to a lender, a traditional kind of bank lender, for this money, it's probably, you can show them that this is how you've thought through the business, because I think overall, very thoughtful presentation. You've clearly done the research. You clearly understand the marketplace. You've painted a fairly good picture, I think, of the economics that you'll be facing in the marketplace. But at the end of the day, 75 grand isn't a lot of, 75,000 isn't a lot of money. Now, from the banker's perspective, and every bank is different. You go to, a local community bank, and I don't even know, I don't know anything about if you're going to be approaching Mexican banks as opposed to US banks. I can't speak to the Mexican banking market, but the US banking market, if you go to a big bank like a Citibank, a Chase, or whatever, 75 grand, they're not going to do a lot of work to underwrite that loan because it's too small. And from an economic standpoint, there's a certain fixed dollar cost, and it's not fixed, but it's within a parameter just to document and put a loan on the books. A $75,000 loan, depending upon the nature of the bank, is not going to generate a lot of net interest income. And that is, net interest income is the interest rate that they charge on the loan minus the cost of money that it takes for them to fund the loan. So net interest income, think in terms of depending anywhere between 3 to 5%. So if they're charging you 8 and it costs them 3% to fund the loan, they're going to make a net 5%. But from a fixed income from a fixed cost standpoint, they have to book a loan, document it, review it, get it into their system. There's a lot of costs that are fixed, personnel costs mostly. So a $75,000 loan for a really big bank isn't going to make them much money. It's a loss leader if they even make it.
Wow.
So that's the big bank side. Now let's go to the smaller bank side. Smaller banks don't have the overhead of a Citibank or a JP Morgan Chase. So their overall fixed cost on putting a loan on their books is liable to be a little less. Their cost of funds is also liable to be a little less. A Citibank has lots of liquidity, cash, so their cost of funds is just technically lower. That's one of the benefits of being a big bank.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell you, where to head. My general advice to most people, excuse me, I apologize for all my
Oh,
coughing,
please go.
generally is for a small, relatively new business is to go to the smallest, most locally owned commercial bank you can find, because you'll be in the same room with people that make decisions. You go to a Citibank or a JP Morgan or a Bank of America, you'll fill out an application. They'll put it in their system. It'll be approved or rejected at a loan approval credit factory somewhere on the planet. I can't tell you where on the planet it might be,
Yeah.
but they'll run a credit score, they'll do a credit report, and they'll basically score their application based upon what they think is relevant. So smaller banks for smaller loans makes a lot of sense. And the cost of the borrowing to you, you should be a little flexible in what you're willing to accept on the smaller loans. The other option you have is to go to an online lender, a fintech kind of lender. I generally don't recommend that. The rates are going to be much higher. They will, your pitch deck will mean very little to them. They may not even want to see it. They'll credit score you, they'll credit report you, and they'll make a decision based upon essentially those kinds of factors. And they'll charge you significantly more than a bank would. Another option, and these are sometimes a little slightly harder to find, but easily done with Google, and look for a credit union, which is I don't know if you're familiar with credit unions, but in this country, they often require certain commonality amongst the people that they allow to bank with them, number one. So for example, in DuPage County, there is a DuPage County credit union, takes anybody from DuPage. There are federal credit unions. There are credit unions that are for certain employees of certain kinds of companies or members of whatever. But you can look for credit unions near you, and you look for credit unions that have, you're looking for two specific features. One, that would accept you as a potential member, and number two, would do commercial lending. Not every credit union does commercial lending. They were essentially set up initially, I believe, to provide consumer kinds of credit, car loans, mortgages, credit cards for individuals. But a number of them have added commercial lending as another source of funding. Overall, I would say that what you're trying to do, what you've laid out, makes sense. It seems that the returns aren't large, but if you can use the Amazon machine and you can generate a lot of different titles, then that could generate a significant amount of revenue for you over a number of years as you build up your inventory of titles. One thing you didn't discuss in your pitch deck was, what you have to pay to the authors. So that 50 cents that comes from Amazon on your $5 book, 50 cents goes to your company, how much of that 50 cents then has to go to your authors?
Mm.
Because that strikes me as the first major
Thank you.
cut. And then obviously you've got to cover your overhead, your insurance, your wherever you plant your office, and paying yourself, obviously.
Mhm.
Those are kind of my initial reactions.
No, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. As it is. Boom. Yeah, that's your banker hat coming out.
Yeah, we're not the politest folk in the world when it gets down to this kind of stuff. So
No, but
I've always felt it's better to be, to say it straight, get the information out there, that, and especially at SCORE, you know, you've thought it through. I look at it and I focus, and I'm not the smartest sharpest knife in the drawer either. I look at this as a very low margin business, so you've got to do volume.
volume. Mhm.
And most of my banking career was dealing with companies that weren't high volume. They were high gross profit or reasonable gross profit
Mm.
and reasonable volume. So my background is probably shading kind of my comments, obviously, but you've thought it through. I can see it working once you attract enough titles and
For sure, for
authors.
sure. No, I appreciate these comments, and now in my mind makes sense about the weakness of the presentation as well. Like I take the focus on the simple book margin. For sure, you find that correctly now. So I need to prepare a better puzzle on that. Like
You make some assumptions that
mhm.
80% will be, and I'm just making up numbers here, so don't write them down, but 80% in your first year or so, or first 5 quarters, will be the low margin books, and maybe 10%, 15% will be the second category books,
Mhm.
and 5%, and just kind of meld that all together. It looks like it's a more structured projection.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, that gives me homework, just to have a
Okay,
better projection.
sure.
Well, let me stop the recording now.
Okay.